My hands trembled as I stared at my laptop screen, struggling to process everything that unfolded last night. My heart felt as though it had been ripped out, stomped on, and thrown into the trash. Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be the same again. It all began as a regular Thursday evening. I came home from work, exhausted as usual. I'd been busting my back for weeks, trying to finish a massive project for my boss, and all I craved was to collapse on the couch with a beer and watch some mindless television. But when I walked through the door, the house felt off. Sarah, my wife of 10 years, wasn't there to greet me as she usually did. No kiss, no "how was your day?" Just silence. I called out for her, but the only response I got was the faint hum of the refrigerator. There was a note on the kitchen counter. I can still picture it. Her neat handwriting staring back at me like a punch to the gut. Out with friends. Don't wait up. That was it. No cheerful emoji, no reassurance, just those cold, detached words. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping into my chest. Maybe I was just being paranoid. She'd been going out more often lately, sure, but she deserved to have a life outside of me, right? But then I remembered last week, when she came home late, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine, and the way she'd been glued to her phone, giggling at texts she refused to share with me. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I desperately didn't want to believe it. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the note as if it held some kind of hidden message. After about an hour of spiraling thoughts, I decided to text her, something casual. "Hey, hope you're having fun. Let me know when you're heading home." No response. Another hour passed, and my anxiety was through the roof. I pulled up the tracking app we'd installed on our phones years ago for safety reasons. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I was crossing a line, but then I remembered the cologne, the secret giggles, and the way she'd been pulling away from me lately. I needed to know. Her location popped up on the screen. A bar. Not one of the nice ones downtown where she usually went with her friends, but a dingy little dive on the other side of town. My stomach churned. Why would she be there? I grabbed my keys and headed out, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Was she in trouble? Or worse, was she with someone else? The drive felt like an eternity. By the time I pulled up to the bar, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. The neon sign flickered above the entrance, casting a sickly red glow over the parking lot. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The place was crowded, noisy, and reeked of stale beer and cigarettes. I scanned the room, my heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. And then I saw her. She was sitting in a booth near the back, her head thrown back in laughter, her hand resting on the arm of some guy I didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had that smug, overconfident look that made my blood boil. Sarah was leaning in close to him, her body language screaming intimacy. I froze. My entire world came crashing down around me. My wife, the woman I thought was my soulmate, my partner, my everything, was here, laughing and flirting with another man like I didn't even exist. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there watching them, my chest tightening with every passing second. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, and this overwhelming sense of inadequacy. Was I not enough for her? What did he have that I didn't? I wanted to march over there, grab her by the arm, and demand answers. But instead, I found myself walking to the bar, ordering a drink, and sinking onto a stool. I sat there, nursing my whiskey, my eyes glued to their table. She hadn't noticed me yet, too wrapped up in her little bubble of infidelity. They were laughing, touching, whispering, and every second felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I felt like a fool, like the punchline of some cruel joke. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, walked over to their booth, and cleared my throat. Sarah turned to look at me, her smile fading the moment she saw my face. "Ethan," she said, her voice laced with shock and irritation, as if I were the one doing something wrong. I stared at her, then at the guy, then back at her. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I managed to choke out. "Out with friends, huh?" Her expression shifted, first surprise, then annoyance. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her tone defensive and dismissive. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Really, Sarah? Because it looks exactly like what it is." The guy tried to interject, mumbling something about not wanting any trouble, but I silenced him with a glare. "You should leave," I said, my voice slow and trembling. He hesitated, glancing at Sarah for confirmation, but she just crossed her arms and said nothing. Eventually, he grabbed his jacket and slinked away, leaving the two of us alone. I turned back to Sarah, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She rolled her eyes, like I was being dramatic. "Oh, come on, Ethan, don't be so sensitive. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I reached for my wedding ring, sliding it off my finger with shaking hands. "You know, I thought this meant something," I said, holding it up for her to see. But I guess I was wrong. Before she could respond, I placed the ring on the table in front of her. "Here, you can keep it. Maybe you can give it to him." And with that, I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving my wife and my entire world behind. I don't remember much of the drive home that night. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, and my chest felt like it was about to explode. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to cry, to punch something. Anything, to release the unbearable weight that was crushing me. But instead, I just drove in silence, replaying the scene in the bar over and over in my head. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked so different. It was the same house I'd poured my sweat and soul into for 10 years, the place where we celebrated anniversaries, hosted family dinners, and built what I thought was a life together. But now, it felt like a stranger's home, cold, empty, hollow. I walked inside, and the silence hit me like a freight train. No sound of Sarah humming in the kitchen, no laughter from some cheesy sitcom playing in the background. Just silence. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the note she'd left earlier, the words, "Don't wait up," taunting me like a cruel joke. My mind was a storm of emotions. Anger, pain, humiliation. They all swirled together, each one trying to drown out the others. I thought about calling her, demanding an explanation, but what would be the point? I'd already seen everything I needed to see. The image of her with that guy, laughing and touching him like I didn't even exist, was burned into my brain. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels on the TV, scrolling mindlessly on my phone, but nothing worked. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and my thoughts kept circling back to her. How could she do this to me? After everything we'd been through, after all the sacrifices I'd made for her, how could she betray me like this? Hours passed, and I was still sitting there, lost in my thoughts, when I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart started pounding in my chest, a mix of rage and anxiety flooding through me. I didn't know what I was going to say or do, but I knew I couldn't just let this slide. The front door opened, and she walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. She froze when she saw me sitting there, her face betraying a flicker of surprise before settling into a mask of annoyance. "You're still up?" she said, her tone casual, like she hadn't just spent the night with another man. I stood up, my hands shaking, and took a deep breath. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound calm. She sighed, rolling her eyes as she set her purse down on the counter. "Ethan, it's late. Can't this wait until morning?" "No, Sarah," I snapped, my voice rising. "It can't. I need to know what the hell is going on." She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter, her expression bored and condescending. "What do you mean? Nothing's going on." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "Don't play dumb with me, Sarah. I saw you at the bar with him." Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing into a glare. "So, you were spying on me," she shot back, her voice sharp. "That's just pathetic, Ethan." "Spying on you?" I repeated, my voice cracking with anger. "I wouldn't have to if you weren't sneaking around behind my back." She shrugged, her tone dismissive. "It's not like that. We're just friends." "Friends?" I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call holding hands and laughing like a couple of teenagers?" "Friends." She threw her hands up in frustration. "You're being ridiculous. I can't even have a conversation with someone without you losing your mind." I stared at her, my chest heaving, and for the first time, I realized just how little she cared. There was no remorse in her eyes, no apology on her lips, just defiance and contempt. "You don't even care, do you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She rolled her eyes again, letting out an exasperated sigh. "Oh, please, Ethan, stop being so dramatic. This is why I don't tell you anything. You're always so insecure." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Insecure? That's what she thought of me. After everything I'd done for her, All the times I'd put her needs before my own, I was the insecure one. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You know what, Sarah? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am insecure, but you gave me every reason to be. She didn't respond, just stood there, her arms crossed, her expression cold and unfeeling. And in that moment, I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I fell in love with. She wasn't the woman I married. She was a stranger, someone who didn't care about me or our marriage. I turned away, my shoulders slumping as the weight of it all came crashing down on me. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice barely audible. Can't do what? She asked, her tone mocking. Be a grown-up and handle a little conflict? No, I said, turning back to face her. I can't keep pretending that this marriage means anything to you. I can't keep fighting for someone who doesn't even care if I'm in the room. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a laugh, a cold, bitter laugh that sent chills down my spine. Well, maybe if you weren't so pathetic, I'd have a reason to care. That was the final straw. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay there, not with her, not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at that bar, laughing with him, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief. But mostly, I felt empty, the kind of emptiness that made it hard to even breathe. I spent the night sitting on the couch, staring at the wedding photo hanging on the wall. We looked so happy back then, so full of hope and love. It felt like a lifetime ago. I wondered if she ever looked at that photo, if it ever meant anything to her, or if it was just another decoration she didn't care about. Morning came, and Sarah emerged from the bedroom looking as if nothing had happened. She was scrolling through her phone, completely ignoring the elephant in the room. It was infuriating. How could she be so casual, so unaffected, when my entire world was crumbling? She finally looked up at me, raising an eyebrow. Are you seriously still sulking? Sulking, I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. You think that's what this is, Sarah? You betrayed me. She scoffed, tossing her phone onto the counter. Oh, get over it, Ethan. You're acting like I committed some horrible crime. I went out with a friend, that's it. You're the one turning it into something it's not. Her words were like gasoline on the fire burning inside me. I stood up, my hands trembling. Stop lying, Sarah. I'm not stupid. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way you touched him. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Honestly, Ethan, this is why I can't talk to you. You're always so dramatic. Dramatic? I said, my voice rising. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and I'm the dramatic one? She shrugged, her expression cold and dismissive. Maybe if you weren't so clingy and insecure, I wouldn't need to sneak around. That was it. The breaking point. Her words cut deeper than anything else she'd said. I felt the last bit of hope I'd been holding on to shatter into a million pieces. You know what, Sarah? I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain. I'm done. I'm done being the punching bag for your excuses. I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't give a damn about me. She didn't respond, just stared at me with that same cold, indifferent expression. I'll pack my things, I said, turning away from her. You can have the house, the car, everything. I just want out. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she laughed, a bitter, mocking laugh that sent chills down my spine. Good. Maybe now I'll finally have some peace. I didn't look back. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. As I threw my clothes into the bag, tears streamed down my face. I wasn't just leaving a house or a marriage. I was leaving the life I thought I'd built with someone who cared. When I walked out the door, suitcase in hand, she didn't try to stop me. She didn't say a word. I was on my own now, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt both terrified and free. The drive away from the house was surreal. It felt like I was watching my life crumble in slow motion, but I was powerless to stop it. My car was packed with hastily thrown together belongings, and I had no destination in mind. I just needed to get away, away from her, away from the memories, away from the betrayal. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with flickering lights and a faint smell of mildew in the air. It wasn't much, but it was all I could afford on such short notice. I checked in, dropped my bag on the floor, and collapsed onto the stiff, lumpy bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The reality of what had just happened hit me like a freight train. I had left my home, my marriage, my entire life behind. And for what? A woman who didn't care about me, a relationship that had clearly meant nothing to her. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos of us. There we were, on our honeymoon, smiling on the beach. Another photo of us at a family barbecue, laughing over something silly. And then there was the picture of us in front of our first house, arms wrapped around each other, so full of hope and dreams. What had gone wrong? When did the laughter turn to silence, the love to contempt? I replayed every argument, every cold shoulder, every moment when she dismissed me like I was a burden. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe I'd been blind to the warning signs because I didn't want to admit the truth. Our marriage had been dying for years, and I was the only one trying to keep it alive. I spent the next couple of days in that motel, wallowing in my own misery. I called in sick to work, ignored texts from friends, and barely ate anything. I was a mess, a pathetic, heartbroken mess. But on the third day, something inside me shifted. I don't know if it was the endless hours of self-pity or the realization that Sarah wasn't losing any sleep over me, but I knew I couldn't stay like this forever. I had to pick myself up, no matter how broken I felt. I started by reaching out to a friend, Mike, my coworker, and the only person who'd ever had my back. I told him everything, from finding Sarah at the bar to walking out on our marriage. "Man, I'm so sorry," he said after I finished. "But honestly, you did the right thing. You deserve better than someone who treats you like that." Hearing those words felt like a lifeline. For the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone. Mike offered to let me crash at his place until I figured things out, and I reluctantly agreed. Moving into his spare room wasn't ideal, but it was better than rotting away in that motel. Living with Mike was humbling. I went from having my own home to sharing a tiny apartment with a roommate, but it gave me time to reflect. I started going to the gym, pouring my anger and frustration into weights and cardio. I focused on work, staying late to avoid going home, and facing the emptiness of my new reality. Sarah, meanwhile, didn't reach out. Not once. No texts, no calls, nothing. It was like I'd been erased from her life, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But it also fueled my resolve. If she could move on so easily, then so could I. Or at least, that's what I told myself. 2 weeks had passed since I walked out of my house, my marriage, and everything I thought I knew. Life was a strange mix of numbness and routine. I'd wake up in Mike's spare room, go to work, hit the gym, and then collapse onto the couch, exhausted but still unable to sleep. I told myself I was moving forward, but in reality, I was just going through the motions. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. Seeing Sarah's name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. I stared at it, unsure if I should answer. What could she possibly want? For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity and maybe a lingering thread of hope got the better of me. "Hello," I said, my voice hesitant. "Ethan," she began, her tone sharper than I expected. "We need to talk." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, now you want to talk? You sure I'm not being dramatic for wanting answers?" She ignored my jab. "I need you to come by the house. We need to figure out what's going to happen next." "What's there to figure out, Sarah?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You made it pretty clear where you stand." "Don't start," she snapped. "Just come by tomorrow evening. We need to sort this out." I didn't want to go. The thought of seeing her again, standing in the house we once shared, felt like pouring salt on an open wound. But a part of me wanted closure, needed it even. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. The next evening, I pulled up to the house. It felt strange being there, like I was visiting a place from a past life. The porch light was on, and through the window, I could see Sarah sitting at the dining table, her phone in hand. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door. She opened it before I could knock, her expression unreadable. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The house smelled the same, her favorite vanilla candle burning in the corner, but it felt different, colder, emptier. She motioned for me to sit at the table. I did, though the tension in the room was suffocating. "So," I began, crossing my arms. "What's this about?" She sighed, sitting across from me. "Look, Ethan, we've both made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You think this is just some mistake? You were sneaking around behind my back, Sarah. You betrayed me." Her face hardened. And you think you were some perfect husband? Always moping around, complaining about work, never doing anything exciting? Honestly, Ethan, you're just as much to blame for this as I am. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious right now? You cheated on me, Sarah? How is that my fault? She shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any insult. Maybe if you'd put more effort into our marriage, I wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I sat there, stunned, as she continued. Anyway, she said, waving her hand dismissively, we need to figure out what to do with the house. I'm staying here, obviously, but we need to divide things up. Furniture, bills, all of it. Of course you're staying, I said, my voice bitter. You wouldn't want to inconvenience yourself, would you? She rolled her eyes. Don't be petty, Ethan. This is just how it has to be. For a moment, I didn't respond. I just stared at her, wondering how I'd ever been blind to the person she really was. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the Sarah I thought I knew. She was cold, calculating, and completely devoid of remorse. Fine, I said, finally standing up. Take the house. Take the furniture. Take whatever you want. I don't care anymore. She looked surprised, but she quickly masked it with another shrug. Good. I'm glad we can be adults about this. Adults. The word echoed in my mind as I walked out the door, my fists clenched at my sides. I didn't feel like an adult. I felt like a fool who'd wasted 10 years of his life on someone who didn't deserve it. As I got into my car and drove away, I told myself this was the last time I'd let her get under my skin. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The drive back to Mike's apartment felt endless. I couldn't stop replaying Sarah's words in my head. Maybe if you'd put more effort into our marriage. How could she twist the blame like that? How could she make me the villain in her story? Every mile I drove, the anger simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over. When I finally reached Mike's place, he was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels. He glanced up as I walked in, his expression shifting the moment he saw my face. Rough night? He asked, muting the TV. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat down heavily in the armchair. You could say that. Mike handed me a beer, and I told him everything. How Sarah had blamed me for her actions, how she dismissed my pain, and how she was more concerned about dividing the furniture than the wreckage of our marriage. Mike shook his head, his jaw tightening. She's something else, man. You don't deserve that. Yeah, well, she seems to think I do. I muttered, taking a long sip of beer. For the next few days, I tried to focus on work and keep my mind off Sarah, but it was like she'd taken up permanent residence in my brain. Every time I opened my phone, I debated deleting our old photos or unfollowing her on social media, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Part of me wasn't ready to let go, even though I knew I had to. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, half expecting it to be some telemarketer. But instead, I heard a familiar voice. Hey, Ethan, it's Chloe. Chloe was one of Sarah's co-workers. We weren't particularly close, but we'd chatted at office parties a few times. Her voice was shaky, almost nervous. Chloe? Ah, hi. What's going on? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she said, I need to tell you something. It's about Sarah. My stomach dropped. What about her? Chloe hesitated again, as if she was debating whether to say anything at all. Finally, she sighed. Look, I know it's not my place, but I can't keep quiet anymore. Sarah's been seeing that guy you saw her with for months. He's not just some random guy, he's her boss. Her boss? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd always suspected something was going on at her office, but hearing it confirmed made it feel so much worse. How do you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She's not exactly discreet, Chloe admitted. She talks about him all the time at work, brags about their little adventures. Honestly, it's disgusting. I don't know how she can look you in the eye and act like nothing's wrong. My grip tightened around the phone. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth, Chloe said. She's been making a fool out of you, Ethan. And the worst part? She doesn't even feel bad about it. She told some of us at work that she's glad you're out of the house because it makes things easier for her. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Easier for her? Was that all our marriage had been to her? A burden she couldn't wait to get rid of? Thank you for telling me, I managed to say, my voice trembling. Of course, Chloe replied. And Ethan, you deserve so much better than her. Don't let her make you think otherwise. After we hung up, I sat there in silence, trying to process everything I just heard. Sarah had been cheating on me with her boss for months. She'd been bragging about it at work, mocking me behind my back, and now she was glad I was gone because it made her life more convenient. The anger I'd been suppressing for weeks finally exploded. I grabbed the nearest object, a coffee mug, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, but the noise did little to ease the storm raging inside me. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let Sarah walk all over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of determination. It was time to take control of my life again. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. Chloe's call had been a wake-up call, a reminder that I wasn't just some helpless victim in all of this. Sarah had spent months betraying me, mocking me, and treating me like an afterthought. She didn't care about me, so why should I keep letting her control my life from the shadows? It was time to fight back. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I explained the situation, everything from Sarah's infidelity to her dismissive behavior during our last conversation. My lawyer, an older guy named David, listened patiently before letting out a low whistle. "Ethan, I've seen a lot of divorces, but this one sounds especially ugly," he said. "The good news is, infidelity can work in your favor. If we can prove she's been cheating, you might be entitled to more than you think." Prove she's been cheating. The word stuck with me. Chloe's call was a start, but I needed something solid, something undeniable. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I didn't like the idea of spying on someone, even if that someone was Sarah, but I needed evidence, and this was the only way to get it. I found a PI named Paul through David's recommendation. Paul was no nonsense, with a face that looked like it had seen too much of the world. I explained the situation, and he nodded like he'd heard it all before. "Don't worry," he said, sliding a small notebook into his pocket. "I'll get you what you need." While Paul got to work, I focused on getting my own life back on track. I moved out of Mike's place and into a small apartment closer to work. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with peeling paint and questionable plumbing, but it was mine. For the first time since leaving Sarah, I felt like I had a space that was entirely my own. I also started reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years. It was awkward at first, explaining why I was suddenly back in their lives, but most of them were supportive. One night, over beers, my friend Kevin told me something that stuck with me. "Dude, Sarah always seemed off," he said, "like she acted like she was too good for you or something. I don't know why you put up with her for so long." His words stung, but they also made me realize something. I'd spent so much of my marriage bending over backward to make Sarah happy, trying to be the husband I thought she wanted, that I'd lost sight of my own worth. A week later, Paul called. "I've got what you're looking for," he said. I met him at a coffee shop, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. He handed me a folder, and when I opened it, my stomach turned. Photos. Dozens of them. Sarah and her boss cozying up to each other at restaurants, walking hand in hand through the park, and most damning of all, entering a hotel together. I closed the folder, my hand shaking. "This is it," I said, my voice barely audible. Paul nodded. "It's solid evidence. Your lawyer will know what to do with it." That night, I called David and told him about the photos. He assured me that this was exactly what we needed to strengthen my case. For the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. But even as I started to piece my life back together, the anger and betrayal lingered. Sarah hadn't just hurt me. She'd shattered my trust, my self-esteem, and my faith in the life we built together. I wasn't sure what my next steps would be, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her win. The morning of our meeting with the lawyers, I felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. This was it. The moment I'd confront Sarah, not just with words, but with cold, hard evidence. I had spent days preparing myself, combing through the folder of photos Paul had collected and rehearsing what I would say. I wasn't going to crumble this time. Sarah and I met at David's office. She arrived late, of course, her usual dramatic entrance in full force. She wore a bright red dress, like she was heading to a party, not a legal negotiation to end our marriage. Her smug smile disappeared the moment she saw me sitting at the conference table with David. "Let's get this over with," she said as she sat down, her tone dripping with impatience. David opened the session calmly, laying out the basics of what we needed to discuss: division of assets, financial settlements, and next steps. Sarah barely paid attention, scrolling through her phone and tossing in dismissive comments like, "That's mine." Or, Ethan doesn't even use that. Finally, David nodded to me. Ethan, why don't you share your position? I took a deep breath and opened the folder of photos, sliding them across the table toward Sarah. She glanced down, her face shifting from confusion to shock, and then to something that looked almost like panic. What the hell is this? She demanded, her voice rising. Proof, I said simply. Proof that while I was trying to save our marriage, you were busy sneaking around with your boss. Her eyes darted toward the photos, then back to me. You hired someone to spy on me? That's disgusting, Ethan. I let out a bitter laugh. Disgusting, Sarah? What's disgusting is you parading around with him while mocking me behind my back. Don't turn this around on me. Sarah's lawyer, a stiff-looking woman in a gray suit, leaned forward. We're not here to debate personal grievances. Let's focus on the division of assets. But Sarah couldn't let it go. You're pathetic, Ethan, she hissed. This is why I couldn't stand being with you anymore. You're weak, clingy, and now you're playing the victim. Her words stung, but they didn't break me. Not this time. I looked her straight in the eye and said, maybe I was weak. Maybe I spent years bending over backward to make you happy. But not anymore. You've made it clear who you are, and I'm done letting you walk all over me. David stepped in, steering the conversation back to the practicalities. Thanks to the evidence, we were able to negotiate a settlement that heavily favored me. Sarah didn't get the house, the car, or any financial handouts she'd been hoping for. Her lawyer tried to argue, but the photos were undeniable. By the end of the meeting, Sarah was seething. As we walked out of the office, she turned to me, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won, Ethan? You're still the same sad, pathetic man you've always been. This doesn't change that. I paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. Then I smiled, genuinely smiled, and said, maybe, but at least now I don't have you dragging me down anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends. It wasn't easy, and there were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, but slowly, I started to feel like myself again. As for Sarah, word got around that her relationship with her boss didn't last long after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, he wasn't as interested in her when she no longer had a house or a husband to fall back on. Looking back, I realized that losing Sarah wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to rediscover who I was and what I wanted out of life. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where that life would take me.